Hello and welcome to this week's review of the latest episode of My Hero Academia titled Friend. You know the rules and so do I. Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought about this week's episode of My Hero Academia. Whilst you're be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today. It will do them a power of good. And of course, thank you to all those of you who have subscribed recently over the course of this past season. And recently, it really does do me a power of good. Now with all that said and done, let us get into the review. And we'll start off, as we always do, by getting into the positives, and I just want to say, here and now, I was right. Last week was setting up for an ambush, though I will be honest, I didn't expect them to get into it quite so soon, but all the same, I was right. Now, I will just say, before people accuse me of getting a little bit too egocentric, the fact that I got that right is not the positive. The thing that I say is a positive with all that kind of stuff is because I am kind of glad that they didn't drag this whole stuff, this whole ambush thing out any longer than it needed to be. It didn't need to be a ticking clock, because I could easily have seen this being a case of, oh, we need to get ready for that big meeting that All For One is having in a couple months' time. We need to get the band back together and start training for this so that we can take them down once and for all. And then we would have got into it, and then it would have just turned into an ambush, and then ultimately would have got something that just boils down to what we had in the first half of this season. Again, either going on for just as long or being incredibly condensed, bearing in mind that we're only a few episodes away from the end of this season. Though, of course, with that said, I kind of did expect that maybe it would be the end of season confrontation. We'll exactly see where all that's going, because there's a part of me that does genuinely worry how, or rather wonder how we're going to cap this season off, but we'll soon see about that. I think the action within this week's episode was decent for what it was. Admittedly, the action and the fight sequences weren't really the focus of this week's episode, which is fair. I think that we had a bit too much action over the course of this season thus far, and I think that the past couple episodes have been good enough to make up for just having a more quiet period going forward. Again, I am wondering as to what they're actually going to do as the big final thing for this year's season, but we'll get into that in just a few weeks' time. The action itself was decent. Credit where credit is due, but I can't really talk about it much beyond that, because it was good, it was effective, it was good to see just how much Midoriya has evolved and changed, particularly as a hero, over the course of the past few months and the past few episodes. As I said in a previous review, we are at a point now where Midoriya knows how much power he needs to use for any given moment. He knows exactly what he needs to do. He's become more of a precision machine, more so than he did at the start of this whole story, where he was breaking his legs at seemingly every given opportunity. Or his arms more specifically, but you get the idea. He's now reformed himself into a more focused being, and just seeing his transformation has been eye-opening to a certain degree and scary in many regards. But we'll discuss that in greater detail in a couple of moments. This feeling of decay and collapse that we've had over the past few episodes just continues on now. Again, we see this within the landscape and the background. So we see how many buildings are now falling to a state of disrepair, how many have just fallen into total ruins. We're seeing just the total, almost incomprehensible collapse of just about everything right now. How entire cities, blocks have just been smashed to pieces in efforts to try and quell and contain the villains, or as best as they can do, bearing in mind how many heroes are now hanging up their capes and moving on. I am glad that we are seeing a little bit more of that, and we're seeing it with a character whom we're a little bit more familiar of, because up until this point it has been characters that have just been in the background or were vaguely mentioned a few episodes back. Though I will admit that seeing it this week with Deadlock, or whatever his name is, Dead Fist, Deathjaw, well, as neat as it was and as great as that little monologue that they give was, I do think it lacks a little bit of impact, because they are a character that we've not really seen that much of. Like, had it been someone like Eraserhead or Midnight, if she was still alive, just turning around saying, right, I'm done, I'm packing it all up, I think that would have had a lot bit more of an emotional weight to it, because at this point, we're just kind of locked in. Everybody that's part of the main cast is part of the main cast, and we're not going to see the end of them probably at all now at this point. I think that we're kind of just locked in with everybody until we get into those final few storylines of My Hero Academia when we get to the end of it. There is a part of me that is starting to worry that having all these moments of the heroes hanging up the capes is starting to get a little bit self-indulgent. I think that goes with a lot of this decay and collapse stuff. Whilst I have been looking forward to it and I've been an advocate for seeing a lot of it, there is a part of me that worries that it is starting to venture into a case of being self-indulgent, and that might just because we don't really get a great variety of seeing exactly how things are decaying and how things are changing. It's just been seeing the same stuff over and over again. It's shots of ruined buildings. It's people wagging their fingers at heroes for being arseholes and not saving the day. It's hushed off-camera tones of people having conversations about whether the heroes are still worth it or not. And whilst all of that stuff is good in and of itself, I think that we need more than just that. I mean, again, whilst this itself might be self-indulgent, we don't see the wider implications of this. We don't see the debates happening on the news channels about politicians arguing, do we really need superheroes anymore? Should we cut their funding? Should we increase it? We don't see how media in this world is really changing in response to all of this. It's just people in corridors going, ooh, that endeavour, again and again, and it's starting to get a bit too repetitive for my likes. So hopefully, as we get into the next few episodes and the next few seasons, that'll be varied up a little bit, because it's starting to feel a bit Groundhog Day, but thankfully it seems as though things are starting to turn a corner here. Another point for Decay, which I think is one of the better points, is just seeing how Midoriya's costume has just become increasingly ravaged and monstrous as time has gone by. It's just become worn down and torn up and smashed apart to the point where he just doesn't resemble himself at all. He has changed. He's gone beyond the nervous kid that he was at the start of this story. He's gone beyond the more competent hero that we've seen a few weeks ago, and has now just become this almost formless, cold force for justice. Whilst he is efficient in this role and in this form, he's not inspirational and he's not aspirational in the way that other heroes have been. He's a force for peace. He's not the symbol of peace. He's become just this entity for pure, unbridled, cold and efficient justice, and nothing really else. He isn't the symbol of peace. At this point, he really isn't the successor to All Might. He's something else that this world, in this particular moment, doesn't really need. It needs someone to believe in and someone to hope and root for, and for the most part, again, going back to a previous mention, we have these off-camera voices not even being sure as to what he is. They don't know if he's a hero or a villain that likes fighting other villains, or a Nomu. They just see this shape that just happens to show up, and they don't see him as being a hero. And there's an argument to be made that in his quest for justice and revenge, that Midoriya has been starting to undermine the wider cause, but I think that's a debate and discussion for a whole other time. Another thing that I did like was the fact that we did get to see more view of the class of 1A, which was good. It was nice to see more of them. I've always been an advocate for seeing more of them throughout the show, and for extended periods, much like Midoriya himself, they feel as though they've been pushed to one side a little bit too frequently. Not to the same extent as Midoriya has done, because as I've said in previous episodes, it feels as though Midoriya has become a side character in his own story, but again, discussion for another point. But it has been good to see them again, seeing them decide, right, we're going to save our friend, and I really did like the moment where Bakugo just made his grand entrance to help save the day, and to the point where he's pretty much taunting and threatening Midoriya to get back in the saddle and to join up with them and to come back into the fold. It is good to see them all trying to save Midoriya. It's sweet. I like seeing more of them, but there is a part of me that does, on the one hand, wish we had seen more of them before this, and on the other hand, there's a part of me that wishes that we kind of put this reunion back a few more episodes. Maybe have this be something that happened towards the start of next season, gave us this greater sense of isolation for Midoriya, and then have the moment where they come back into it. But that's a different strokes of a different folks kind of a deal, I suppose. And even as within the society itself, I'm surprised they haven't been used more, because the hero community society leader people seemed all too keen for using child soldiers up until this point, but now they seem to have gone cold on the idea. And to be fair, given everything that's going on, you really can't throw a bunch of teenagers into situations like this, but even still, it feels like the kind of thing that he would do and another time they probably would have done. With that said, everything we have had, what we've seen of it has been good. With that said, let us now just pivot into the negatives, and there aren't that many, though still it would be remiss of me without mentioning at least a couple. First of all, I am kind of getting sick of All For One's predictions. Like, whilst I do admit him setting up for the ambush wasn't bad in that regard, because it just felt like typical supervillain behaviour, I think that as a whole, his prediction stuff is getting a little bit too much. Like, even if we account for the fact that the whole UA mall thing might still be a thing that's happening, he's making predictions for stuff that he'd have no way in knowing that they'd actually be a factor. Like, I could understand if this was all part of a quirk, or a quirk that allowed him to do this, but it's getting to a point where it's getting farcical. I get that he's an intelligent guy, but take, for example, a few episodes back when he met Lady Nagant, and he came up with this big prediction as to what Midoriya would be doing and how it would all end up going, and lo and behold, that's almost exactly what happened. Like, I can accept certain things being the cause of him just being smart enough to figure it out, or being the result of information gained via a mole or a quirk or whatever, but we're getting to a point where it's starting to feel like it's taking the piss a bit. Like, he shouldn't have this level of precognition while either a superpower doing it, information to help him, or because otherwise it just feels like a little bit too coincidental that he's getting everything right. I understand the point as to why he's getting everything right, because he's the villain and we're supposed to feel hopeless, but there comes a point where it becomes less and less believable and just more and more infuriating, but we'll see exactly how all this goes as we go forward. My second negative, and I can't really say that it's a negative per se, but it's the tease that Hero Killer Stain is back, which I won't really hold against the show because I'm willing to see exactly where all this is going to end up going, but here and now I'm not really a fan of that, because it feels as though, to echo a point I've made in a previous video, that we are entering into something of a boss rush mode right now. We are just seeing all the major villains making their comeback again, and it feels incredibly self-indulgent in concept. I will be interested to see exactly where they go with this going forward. It will be interesting to see how he and All Might go through stuff, but we're going to set up for some big speech about heroes aren't really the real heroes, they repress the villains, and the villains aren't really the real villains because they're just people that want to live free. Even though many of them are people that just want to slice up and murder other people, but that doesn't mean they're bad. Again, but we'll soon see about how all that goes. You know, that might be a rant depending on how that particularly all boils out. But still, to get into the overview, I think the episode itself was perfectly fine. I don't think it's as good as previous ones. It, at worst, feels like a little bit too much of being connecting tissue between episodes. But at this point, there is a part of me that wonders exactly where this is going to end up boiling over at the end of this season, because it doesn't feel like we're really building up to a final image in quite the same way as we did last season, but we'll see where all that goes. Well, that's said and done, let us get into Comment Corner! Now it's time for Comment Corner. Only one comment this week, of course. Leave a comment down in the comment section down below. Let me know what you thought about this week's episode of My Hero Academia. You know the rules, and so do I. I don't know why I've started saying that, but hey-ho, that's just something that's entered into the whole script right now. But now, getting into the actual point why we're here, comment section. And our comment comes from Big X1, who says, "Gonna be honest, I'm kind of in two minds about this one." This, of course, referring to last week's episode. "On the one hand, I liked it, and I liked the stuff with Lena Nagant. But on the other, I was expecting more. I hope we see more of her because she seems cool, but she has gone down like she's some form of minion." Now, thank you for the comment, and I can't say that I'm necessarily disappointed by the fact we haven't seen more of her, and that she went down in the way that she did. I feel that she needed to go down in that way for events to unfold in the way that they did do, even it kind of feels a little bit like a wet fart this week. I have the feeling that we are going to see more of her. We are going to see more of her going forward. Something's going to happen to heal her, regenerate her, and then she's going to throw her lot in with the villains again, and we're effectively going to end up feeling like her getting caught was kind of a waste of time, but we'll soon see about that. Like, as I said last week, she was featured just too much in the opening sequence to just be a villain for a couple episodes. She's going to become more of a major thing going forward. Her big moment of triumph probably won't come until next season. So what we do for the next few episodes, God only knows, but we'll cross that bridge together. Anyway, thank you for your comment. As I said previously, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought about this week's episode. I haven't got anything else to say other than say thank you all for watching, thank you all for subscribing, liking, and all that kind of malarkey. We are getting towards the end of this season, so, start thinking about what you thought about this year's season. I will be doing a season review on the 1st of April, once this season has resolved itself. Anyway, thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!